Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I want to share a recording from my archives back in 2021, one of the many I have recorded. So for 6 months I had the opportunity to work for Phoenix Labs on a project called Dragon, also known as Everhaven. It was a beautiful project, a world meant to be explored, full of colors and charm. Unfortunately, like many projects in the game industry, the game was cancelled, so it will never be played. But the art still exists, and the feeling we tried to create is still there, captured in these images. Hello everyone, I'm Florian. I'm a concept artist and art director at Fireball Studio. In this video I want to take you through the creation of this environment piece. It's a concept for a hidden landmark. It was inspired by the ancient city of Petra, carved directly into the rock. So for the next 20 minutes I will show you how this concept art was built. I started with a 3D blockout in MagicaVoxel and then finished the painting in Photoshop. So grab a tea or a coffee, let's sit down and watch how this was made. So everything starts with a simple cube. When I do concept art for environment, I usually start with a sketch. But here I had to come up with a different method. Since this game was supposed to be made of voxels, we wanted it to show in the concept art. That's why I used MagicaVoxel to build the foundation of all the artworks I did. This proved to be an amazing method, since at the beginning of the project, the different teams were struggling to find a decent process, using either full 2D or traditional 3D softwares, which was quite inefficient. Sometimes I really like to think in volumes right away, and that's why I love using MagicaVoxel. It feels less technical 3D and more like playing with digital clay or Legos. So here you can see me starting to carve the architecture a bit. This is where the Petra inspiration comes in. I didn't want a building that was built on top of the ground. I wanted something that was carved inside the earth. There is something very peaceful about architecture that feels like it belongs to the mountain. It feels ancient and permanent. Light is such a great storyteller, especially for natural environments like this. I know I wanted a warm, golden light, like a late afternoon sun hitting a sandstone wall. I positioned the light so that it hits the top left of the structure, but leaves the bottom in shadow. This contrast is quite important. It guides the eye. I used to be afraid of having a large area of shadows in my paintings in the past. We often want to show everything, but it's actually by hiding a lot that we start creating storytelling. The viewer is filling the gaps. You can see me experimenting with different architectural scales here. I tried these massive columns because I liked the depth they added, but in the end I found them too grandiose for this space. So I shifted my focus towards something more organic, simple, and more oriented towards natural carving. At this point I'm happy with the camera angle, the lighting, and the general forms. Now I'm looking to push the detail level and start adding smaller shapes that I can use as reference later on. I wanted to block out some vegetation, so I'm adding some clumps of green voxels to block out trees. This will help me understand the volumes for when I detail these later. I want to balance the warm orange stone with cool fresh greens, kinda like an oasis. I think there is a nice harmony between stone and plants. One is rigid and lasts forever, the other is organic and always changing. You might notice I'm working on areas that are technically out of frame. I like to extend the work a little bit further so the light will interact with those off-screen shapes, sometimes projecting interesting shadows or creating bounce lights that will add even more believability to my final concepts. I continue on detailing the foreground and midground by adding more reservoir of water. I imagine the rain could accumulate and actually feed the plants around. So I decided to add even more traces of greenery and add grass. Overall, you can skip this step in 3D and add this kind of details directly in 2D. But I found out that actually blocking these out in MagicaVoxels isn't that long. And the information I get is very helpful for the paint over. I get the volumes, the perspective, light, shadows. This is a really good time saver for later. Once I'm happy with the composition in 3D, I take a photo of it, a render, and I bring it into Photoshop. The 3D gives me the perspective, the lighting and the shadows. It does a lot of heavy lifting. But now I want to inject more subtlety, details and atmosphere into this piece. My job now is to break the 3D effect, the perfection that comes out of a 3D software. I need to make it feel more like a painting. So I like to keep things simple in Photoshop. My layer stack is very straightforward. I don't want to get lost in menus, I just want to paint. Since we're in a blue sky level of visual development, it means we're really throwing a lot of ideas and see what sticks. This means we're not doing beautiful illustrations. This also means I don't really need to care about my PSD file structure, because it's likely that nobody will ever open this file again. I could also break down the 3D file and the rendering into different passes. But at this point, like I said, this is very early concept art, early visual development, so I'm literally painting on top of the different cubes, trying to smooth out those sharp 90 degrees angles. I want the rock to feel weathered, worn down by sand and wind over hundreds of years. Same for the foliage. I'm trying to break up the 3D to create more organic shapes, more interesting shapes. But I'm trying to stay very faithful to the original silhouette, the perspective and the lighting intention that's coming out of the 3D. So I'm adding a character in this image because the scale is tricky and I want to make sure there is no misunderstanding. I use one of the many amazing designs made by Nicola Saviori and I transform him in just a silhouette with very faint details. He's completely in the shadows in front of the light, this way we can't miss him. From afar he looks very small, but without him we don't know how big this place is. As soon as I put him there, the door becomes massive. The trees feel much more massive, he gives us scale. He is the avatar for the viewer. He's standing there, looking up, discovering this place for the first time. For now we have a very analogous color palette, meaning the colors are neighbors on the color wheel, yellows, oranges, reddish browns, and even green isn't too far. So it's creating a feeling of warmth, but I want to inject a little bit more contrast and I'll use the warm, cool contrast to do so. So I'm kind of pushing the shadows toward a cooler tone, a bit of blue, a bit of purple. I want to add some water and props with these tones as well. This cools down the image and kind of makes the sunlit areas feel even hotter by comparison. So I'm thinking about the focal point of the image, and to me that's the huge entrance in the back. It needs to be the area of highest contrast. So I am making the inside very dark, almost pure black, because curiosity pulls us into the dark. If we see a dark cave, our instinct is to ask what is inside. Yeah, it might be scary, but it's also a mystery. That is like kind of the feeling of adventure, which I really want to try to convey here. So for the foliage, like I said, I'm making sure that I'm respecting the direction of the lighting. Like the foliage can be simplified to sort of blobs or spheres, and I'm really trying to respect that, but I'm also trying to break out of the silhouette and complexify the shapes a little bit. I'm grouping the leaves into big soft volume, and I really like to paint trees this way. You don't have really to worry about every single branch, you just think about the volume. Of course, depending on the art direction, we could add a lot of more details, negative shapes and fine branches, but I'm trying to stay focused on the fact that all these shapes are supposed to be voxels. So there is this sort of blocky quality that I have to respect. We are getting close to the finish line now. The structure is there, the colors are there. Now we need a bit more atmosphere. I'm adding a soft layer of air over the background. We could call it aerial perspective. Things that are further away becomes lighter and less saturated. This helps separate the foreground from the background. It gives the image depth and implies there are particles in the air like sand or dust that are catching the light. When I look at this image now, a few years later, I have mixed feelings. It makes me a little sad that we couldn't finish the world we were building. We had so many ideas for different biomes, different landmarks, different characters, creatures, but unfortunately this is just the reality of the industry. And concept art and world building in general is about trying to capture an idea. Even if the game doesn't exist, the dream is still here in these images. I enjoyed the hours I spent painting those rocks and those trees, and of course imagining what would this place be and what could be inside. I like to add a bunch of notes for the team to reflect upon and hopefully spark some more ideas for the future. I think this is always a pretty cool document to share with your art director. It shows that you are quite invested in the storytelling of your concepts, and this is very valuable for everyone. I hope that watching this process brought you a little bit of inspiration and ideas to create peaceful places. Thank you for watching. If you have questions about the technique or about MagicaVoxel, just ask in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.